All right, so we are live. Oh, that video is awful. How's everybody? All right, so here's my screen. We're doing it from my computer this time. I don't know that I necessarily care for this, but I've already got it all invested and set up, so I don't really have any options to change it. Hopefully, the video quality won't be so bad that you can't stick around. We've got a few things to cover tonight. We're gonna go over my big problem with herbal medicine, but we also want to talk about some of the different options we have today and how I go about teaching my herbal medicine. Now, let me see if I can pull comments up. I'm going to try to do comments. There's Sarah. All right. I am not going to do any. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Sarah? I don't even know how many people we have here. One. I don't want to keep too much dead time. So I would have figured we'd have more than one person. Oh, boy. Yeah, I don't either. There's a share at the bottom of the screen. I could try that. But not if it interrupts my live. So, oh, there's two people. We got two people popped in. I want to get into a whole bunch of it right now, and but it's being recorded. It'll be uploaded. So ultimately, it'll still be there and available. So let's go over a few things. Tonight we're going to discuss my biggest issue with herbal medicine, and I have some real problems with how it's kind of done today, and how a lot of the people that practice herbal medicine don't necessarily reference the type of things that should be referenced when it comes to that. And I think that they've probably lost their way, along the way as we've gone, because if you look at how herbal medicine is approached today, it's considered the alternative to um, allopathic medicine. So allopathic medicine, that's what you would consider, when you go to the doctor and you get your pharmaceuticals, and that is, it's not all. That's what they have, and that's what they practice. So, hey, Durf is here. Hey, everybody's joining in. All right, we got 3 people, four or more. I don't know. We got a few. We're going to go ahead and just keep going, though. This is going to be uploaded when it's all done, so you can go back and reference it. We're going to try to keep it at about an hour. That way people can listen on their commute, or if they really want to, if I can keep their attention, we can go from there. You stay. Trying to limit the echoes. Out in the store, we're in the store. We have a store here where we sell herbs and other goodies. Apparently my screen is backwards. Yeah, I'm not sure how to reverse it. That's inconvenient. Nope. I'm sure somebody else knows how to do that. That's fine. I guess I just won't show you anything. You just have to take my word for it. All right, so the problem with herbal medicine today is, and it happens to be one of the biggest things that I get when I'm doing my videos, is we get people that'll say, how do I do this? How do I use this herb? If I do a video, like the other day I did a video on mandrake root and how mandrake was shown in clinical trials or in scientific studies with mice to reverse radiation damage. And everybody was like, how do you use it? I'm like, well, I really didn't go into the details of how to make a tea out of it or anything, because the plant itself is toxic, but the medicine that comes out of it, was relevant in the moment. And, yeah, people could go and do the research themselves, but you would actually have to go to that particular study and see exactly what they did and how they made it. And then you'd have to duplicate that for yourself, and they did it by, milliliters per kilogram of body weight. It was very, very accurate. Because it's relevant. That stuff is very toxic. But so it's chemotherapy. If you give you the wrong dose of chemotherapy, you die too. Now, real quick, before I get too far into this and before I lose too many people, it's only 5 minutes in, so we'll go. And I do want to point out the next Saturday at 2:30, I am going to be live on YouTube as well. I'll be doing a live broadcast on how to make your own salve, and it's going to be complete process from start to finish. Other than harvesting your herbs, you've seen videos that I've done where I've harvested herbs, so I'm not going to add that into the workshop. But the workshop is going to be up in Lakewood. You still have time to sign up. They're the Bear Soul Studio and Rock Shop in Lakewood, Ohio. Now they're not actually doing it at the store. They have a studio that they do that in, but they will be there. You can go ahead and get a hold of them. I'll try to remember to put that down in the description, or maybe somebody can put it in the comments. Bear Soul Studio and Rock Shop. But yeah, they and in there the workshop itself. If you show up live, here on YouTube, it's free. You can watch it on YouTube for free, and it doesn't matter. But if you do the workshop, it comes with a kit. And the kit has everything you need to make 2 separate salves. The first kit is you have your oil, your beeswax, your herbs, and your tins that you need. This one's a healing salve that I set up. So you give complete instructions on how to make your own salve, and then there's ingredients there to do your own salve, but you have to go out and pick your own herbs, or buy your own herbs, or pick your own selection of herbs to make your own second salve. So each of these kits is $30. The workshop is $30. That doesn't, but the workshop comes with the kit. So those should be available on my Etsy store here pretty quick. Before you patrons get on it, I have a Patreon page, the Herb Guy. Before you patrons get on there and try to buy it, no, you guys contact me first if you want one. You guys get a discount. Any of you patrons that are on my Patreon page, you guys get a discount, so you don't pay full price for that. You guys are patrons. And over there, I'll also have more of my colloidal silver kits. Make your own colloidal silver kit. It also comes with complete instructions. Everything except the distilled water that you need to make it. So have both of those set up. Yeah, it took a lot of work. It took a lot of effort getting everything mailed in. It came in like several. It was a mess. And then I went and actually picked a lot of the herbs that go into it. So the herbs that are there are actually picked. There's some like pine in there and stuff. It's a 5 herb blend, but it's specifically for healing. So I made a healing salve, or you're going to make a healing salve. I made the kit, you make the salve. What I want to do is, when we do those, I want to see if I can do maybe 1 or 2 workshops like that a month, where we do a live and we do a workshop where I'm going to show you how to make something. Probably won't be on the Sunday nights at 7. This will be like a standard time. And once I get some better equipment, I'll be able to set something up to where it'll be a better live stream. I don't want the Sarah. Well, we need to talk about that. I have something for you anyway. Sorry. So what we want to do is try to do these kind of workshops. The next one I want to do is how to make your own glycerin-based or non-alcohol-based tincture, because that's kind of important for people who don't want to have alcohol when they're doing their tinctures. Realistically, you're not really getting that much alcohol by volume comparatively, but I mean, okay, I can understand. There's some people that also just can't have alcohol, right? They're taking medications that counterindicate with alcohol. Some people are on what's called antabuse. And antabuse is, you have you can use hand sanitizer and you get deathly ill. Stuff's awful. But it's to get people to stop drinking, and apparently they have justified it, but it's just as bad for your liver as alcohol is, only you don't get drunk. Yeah, it's some pretty bad stuff. So tonight we're going to go over my main topic and why I really wanted to start this. We only have 50 minutes, so I got to hurry up and break it down. If you're looking to, I guess I better tell you where you can find it. I have a Etsy store where Science Meets Nature that I do kits. Now, if you want herbs, we sell herbs at the Elder Herb Shop, and we have beeswax beads. So if you want to join in on the live, but you don't want to buy a kit, you can go to the Elder Herb Shop or on Etsy and eBay, and we have beeswax beads available for sale. And you can use the beeswax beads plus your own. If you're doing a small batch like we're doing for the workshop, just 1 ounce would be fine for the small batch of salve that we're going to be doing. And then you can pick your own herbs, or we have a nice selection of herbs on eBay you can choose from, and you can join in on that too. And that's the Elder Herb Shop. Sarah, if you could please put that in the comments so that way everybody can see. I would appreciate that. All right, so let's get back onto this. So what's the biggest problem that I have with herbal medicine nowadays? My biggest problem with herbal medicine nowadays is I think that that herbalists don't necessarily react to the science the same way I do when I'm doing my herbal medicine, right? Because when I do my herbal medicine, anybody who's talked to me any length of time is, you know that if I don't have any actual scientific basis to back it up with, then I don't talk about it, because there's no science that says that that's a thing. And so I get a lot of other herbalists and other natural healers we can't have that tonight. A bunch of other herbalists and natural healers that they don't necessarily understand where it comes from, and what they don't necessarily get also is that these herbs are, we do have real science to enter. We do have real science to back up the information that we have about our herbs, and we've known about it for a very long time. Now, when I go through, I have an herbal course on my Patreon page that I'm doing, Herbal Medicine 101, and I'm trying to teach everybody how to make how to actually use your herbs. Now, for you patrons that are following right now, be advised that we're going to change that format up a little bit that we've been doing. I'm still going to break down each one, but we need to start getting to the point where we're actually using the herbs too. So, but this is kind of part of what we're going to be talking about today too. So you get herbalists that'll kind of do what the mainstream does nowadays, and that is they tend to chase the symptoms. I kind of call it chasing the symptoms, or try to pill their way out of something. And by that, yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Durf. We're saving the comments so you guys can read the comments as we go. So we've lost our way in that we don't understand where a lot of our terminology comes from. So now that herbal medicine is the alternative, we tend to look at this as lesser science. Now, when I go through my herbal coursework, I use old textbooks. This is a Materia Medica from 1899. If you were a doctor or a pharmacist, or what they called a therapeutist in 1899, you had to have this book. This had everything. It had all the medicine, all the science, all the chemistry, everything. This was your Google of the day. And this is the science that we've lost, right? We don't talk about this today. So back in the day, all of these herbs that we talk about, at least all the ones that were indigenous here, and the ones, of course, they knew about in Germany, they were all in here, right? How they were broken down. You have belladonna, some of the other ones, the coca, the all of that, they talked about how they broke them down and their actual uses. I'm sorry, allergies a little bit, and I didn't take my drops today. Now the problem with it is that people think that just because today's day and age, our science is so quote unquote advanced, that we know everything there is to know about everything. But their science was super advanced in 1899, surprisingly so. The average person wouldn't be able to understand even the most basic of chemistry that went into how they were doing that back in the day. They knew. Sarah, you also have a Materia Medica, so hey, Angie, so you know what I'm talking about. They had real science to back up their information. So when it came to them talking about the medicinal properties, they had it in there. They talked about how to use it, how to make it, and oftentimes, if you were a rural doctor or if you were a country doctor, you weren't just the doctor, you were the pharmacist too, and you were the therapeutist, and you were kind of the all-around guy that had to take care of it, because there wasn't another guy around for 30, 40, 50 miles, because back then the population was very sparse. They were spread out quite a bit, and oftentimes the doctors, they really didn't have time to go and see every single person every single time. So oftentimes back then, they would teach their patients what they needed to do to help themselves in the moment. So they were also teachers. So they were the doctor, they were the pharmacist, they were the nurse. They did all of that. I mean, some of them had nurses, their wives and whatnot, but for the most part, the doctors did it all, and their science was pretty advanced. Now, some of the other books that I use, and I'll go into some of the problems that I have with the modern people by breaking it down to here. These were textbooks, and I managed to pick up a few. These were textbooks back in the day. If you wanted to be a doctor, this is pharmacy. This is anatomy. These are all from the 1800s. Some of them are as old as 1877. Some of them are as early as 1901. This is a pharmacopoeia from 1877. This had all the listings of all the treatments and everything that they had back then. It's really hard to see on this camera. But this was the drugstore right here, and it talked about what each one was good for. This one discussed how to actually make them. This is the book of pharmacy. This is the book of practicing medicine, part one. I'm still looking for part two, but it discussed how they actually went about doing the therapeutic part of it, understanding the diagnoses, doing, I mean, they kind of had the same type of similar ways of going about it as we do now. They go down a checklist, and if you reach a certain amount, but that wasn't how they did their healing necessarily back then. And then we're going to go into that a little bit earlier too. And then there's some physiology, and I also have an anatomy book as well, which is pretty advanced too. You would think they wouldn't be. Those old books are really cool, aren't they? So today you get a lot of herbalists. Okay, so you get a few different kinds of people that are herbalists. You get the ones that are very free spirited. We'll call them free spirited for the sake of argument. Now, what I think of when don't get offended, Kelly, because I mean this with the most love and love. All right, so the free spirited, I call them the woo woo hippies. All right, now there's the ones they're very free spirited. They're very flowing. They're very don't give a heck what people think. Right? They're all about being them. And oftentimes they'll wear outlandish clothing, what the average person considers outlandish, or they'll wear clothing that's designed specifically to get attention. And those herbalists they're well-meaning, and typically speaking, they're very kind, and they're very knowledgeable. The downside to that is, even though they want to come and help people, they want to be helpful, and they want to be healers. The average person has a real hard time adjusting to that. Now, you get a lot of the healers that'll tell you that you get a lot of those healers that'll tell you that, well, they're just narrow-minded and they can't accept me for the way I am, which, yeah, that's part of it, but there's also the other part that the person that's doing it also knows that that's just not typically what the average person would do. So, or the average person would dress. So yeah, people are closed-minded, but that's their personality, because we've been trained to look at the guy and am I going to listen to somebody that's wearing a muumuu, smells like patchouli, is very free-spirited and kind, or am I going to listen to a guy that walks in who's dead serious? He's got the white lab coat and a stethoscope and a clipboard, and we've been trained to listen to that guy, right? Now the downside to that is the third leading cause of death is medical error, right? So that are you really listening to that guy for any good reason? I don't know. That's on you guys. They can't diagnose. They can get to the bottom of some things, but for the most part, I'm not a huge fan necessarily of listening to somebody who just goes down a clipboard, because he's essentially going to do the same thing anybody else does. He's going to go into his network's version of Google, and he's going to type in all these symptoms that you give him when you sit there on that table, and then he's going to come back to you, and he's going to give you the most probable list of what he thinks it could potentially be. And if you reach an X amount of check marks in his scale, then his or her scale, then that's what they're going to start with. It doesn't necessarily make it right. Now, back in 1899, they knew back then, and let me go over this real quick. They knew back then that there were different ways. Now, modern day people that do that, that the modern day free spirited people that are very free flowing, they have to. Somebody took a like away. Wow, that's brutal. Oh, it must have been somebody that threw. Sorry, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just trying to use that as a basis for people to understand. Not a lot of interactions in the comments. All right. So when it comes to those kind of people, it's kind of standoffish, and it's hard for the average person to come to grips with listening to somebody like that. Now, I know people that dress like that, and they are extremely knowledgeable. One person, she'll be at the workshop next week. She's just as knowledgeable about herbal medicine as I am. So I would say she probably wouldn't agree, but I've listened to her talk about herbs, and she may not have as much of the formal instruction or studies, but she's sharp as a whip, and she knows her herbs, and she knows her stones, and she knows the relation, how all those are also relevant to healing too. Um, other herbalists, they kind of seem, I'm not speaking for anybody, right? I've just the people that I've talked to, and I'm not saying that every single one of them does it. This is just an opinion, but I don't see a lot of people that modern herbalists that want to show, here's what the scientific studies say. They go off what their mentor says or what their classes say. And if you've ever looked at any of the herbal coursework, I've gone through herbal courses and I've looked at a lot of the herbal coursework, and I found that um, I don't I don't know that I necessarily agree with their approach. I've got my own way of how I approach healing, and there's other people that approach it a little bit differently. I try to go to a point to where you don't actually have to have the herbs. The whole point of it is to get your body to a point to where it does its thing all by itself, and you don't have to take those herbal supplements. If you're just taking herbal supplements every day, you're literally just treating the problem, or you're switching your focus from pharmaceuticals to natural. Now, when you go to that, I want to kind of go into the definitions of some of these things so that way we understand a little bit better. When people say alternative medicine, they think herbs, right? But I want you to think that not even back in the day, even today, still today, it still works today. There are still medicines that are made straight out of herbs that are called drugs. Now, the true definition of drugs comes from this textbook. Read it exactly verbatim. When it comes to that word, when I hear that word, oftentimes at least I used to, when I heard that word, I immediately went drugs. Drugs are bad. Drugs are chemicals. Drugs aren't natural, right? Because that's what we're told. We're told that drugs aren't natural. So, according to Dr. Potter, who wrote this book, Materia Medica, he said drugs. Now, the actual definition, or the root word of drug, was Greek, called drugan. If you look online, they'll tell you the Roman version of it, and it's inaccurate. I have the actual textbook that says where it came from. It came from is a term which was formerly applied to dried medicinal plants, and is still employed by writers and others in that sense. By extension, however, it has been made to cover all material substances used for the treatment of disease, including remedial agents from the animal and mineral kingdoms, as well as those from the vegetable kingdom. So they were saying literally anything that's natural can be turned into a drug. The term drug just means dried medicinal herb. That's kind of where we lost our way. Now, the other part of that was he goes down to further define. So you have pharmacology. Pharmacology is the science which treats of drugs and therefore properly embraces the scope of all materia medica and therapeutics relating to drugs. So that was the actual study of how to make them, right? That was what they did. Today we don't do that. We don't call them drugs, because drugs, and even as an herbalist, it has a negative connotation in my mind. So I don't like calling it drugs when I'm giving it to somebody. But by technical definition, I don't give it to people. But by technical definition, drugs is um, dried medicinal plants or dried medicinal natural substances. Now, we hear pharmacy now. I hear pharmacy now. I think of a bunch of chemicals and bottles and pills and, some liquids and whatnot. But pharmacy back then is the name of the art which supplements the science of pharmacology, namely the art of preparing drugs according to the requirements of the pharmacologist and of dispensing them on the prescriptions of the therapeutist. So the pharmacy was actually was where they made the drugs, and typically speaking, in the pharmacies back then, they truly made the drugs as you needed them, or they would have some on hand. Your more common ones. So you would have the codeine, the cocaine, the morphine. They had all that stuff readily available there. There was extracts of atropine from belladonna. They had just regular old cacao that they would just extract, which wasn't the same thing. They used that for like a numbing agent, similar to what we use when they give you the injections at the dentist. Can't think of the name of it now. Then they had what's called the Materia Medica. This is the branch of pharmacology which treats of the substances used in medicines and describes their origin, composition, physical characteristics, chemical properties, modes of preparation and administration, also their physiological and toxicological actions. So what the Materia Medica was what each of those. It's a pretty thick book. There's, I don't know, 700 pages or something like that. 900 pages. Over 900 pages. But it listed all the stuff that they had back then: how to do therapeutics, how to do a little bit of everything. Today we don't do that. Today herbalists will go, what are your symptoms? Oh, you have anxiety, or oh, you have a stomach ache, or Crohn's, or whatever. Even I will sometimes immediately go, when I hear certain things, I'll think herb, but I have to break myself of that and go to figure out what the root cause is. Yeah, you have this particular condition or that particular condition, but if we just try to, right, the herbs should boost or support our natural abilities. We should just try to figure out what the base root of the problem is and then approach it from there. Now, back then, they had a couple of different, they had four different means of what they called therapeutics, four different ways to approach healing. And the one that I liked the most, obviously, of course I would, was the natural healing or the natural therapeutics. And it includes the healing power of nature, those modes and processes of healing which occur independently of art and tend to spontaneously decline and cure of disease. There is no scientific dogma better established than this, that the living organism is in itself adequate to cure all of its curable disorders. So curable meaning like if you had your arm chopped off, or you were, ran over by a horse or something, it's a little bit hard to cure that. Um, right, I'm doing a high stream. Well, TikTok kicked me off their lives, so I'm here now. So we're only going to be on for another 34 minutes, so I have to keep it down to an hour because nobody watches them. And then I spend all the time doing them, and then nobody wants to see them later. So, no, but it never usually works that way. There have been some live streams that have gone for way too long. Yeah, welcome very much, Mary. Sarah is a moderator here, so you got to watch her. She should keep an eye on you guys. um, So what they said by natural, this was back in 1899, by the way, but he figured that the body was really able to cure itself of everything, right? You could just fix your problems. They preferred that method, but I mean, I can't say they were big pharma at that point, but pharmaceutical companies were starting to have a little bit more of an impact in how things were going. So at least in how medications were going. Now everybody wants to blame Rockefeller, but it was more than just Rockefeller. You had Bayer, you had Eli Lilly. All of them were still companies back then. They were companies, and they were influential. Okay, so they were still giving politicians money, and so they kind of went away from natural therapeutics. They kind of went away of having your body do it naturally. This comes from this old textbook. They had applied therapeutics. Now this embraces the application by art of agents foreign to the living organism. So that would be something you would ingest outside of your body, for the purpose of aiding nature to restore the body to a healthy condition. This division is the portion of the subject which is taught separately and systematically in the schools, and therefore is alone considered in the following pages. Other divisions of general subject employed in professional literature and conversation are those entitled to empirical therapeutics and rational therapeutics. Now, Dr. Potter wanted to use the applied therapeutics, and that is giving you just enough to get your body to do it naturally, right? So you only need it for so long. You only need to take it until the condition goes away, and then you don't need to take it every day. They changed it though, and today they do they use what's called rational therapeutics. Now they're able to justify it by saying it's rational, but it's more of a one size fits all type of approach to treatment, which isn't accurate. Not really, because every body is different, and they're going to react a little bit differently to everything you do. They're going to react differently to different pathogens. They're going to react differently to different diseases. So you can't, the cookie cutter approach doesn't necessarily work, at least as far as I'm concerned. The cookie cutter approach doesn't work when it comes to natural healing. Um, Rational therapeutics means the use of remedies for reasons based on a knowledge of the pathological conditions present in the subject and the physiological action of the agent employed. This method is the very antithesis of empiricism and has been the leading idea in every revolt against the empirical therapeutics in the past. What they've done is that's kind of taken over, right? They have that blanket approach. Here's your drug, here's your treatment, here's your drug, here's your treatment. Oh, here's your side effect, or here's another drug. Here's another side effect. Well, here's another drug to counter that side effect, which counters that side effect with that drug. So they keep going. This textbook is called the Materia Medica from 1899. This was before Big Pharma took over everything. So this is how the herbs were really, really used. And this is what I base all of my information, well, not all of it, but a lot of my information off of when I do my Herbal Medicine 101 coursework. Because this was the way they did it. There was no this is how the doctors prescribed it back in the day, right? So it can't be that inaccurate. Now I still use today's science with it too, because we've discovered a lot more stuff than they had back then in the last 125 years. But for the last 125 years, a lot of these drugs that are in this book are still used today. So, I mean, even though some of it aren't right, but they're still getting atropine from hemlock and belladonna, which is a anti-nerve agent. So it if somebody's affected by sarin or VX, that's the antidote is atropine. Well, that comes from some of the most toxic plants we know. So the different teas were made from belladonna back in the day, and they talk about it. And I'm not telling you how to do it, nor will I ever go through that. You need to buy your own book, and then you can do it yourself. But belladonna was actually a sedative. Is it toxic? Of course it is. Anything's toxic if you take too much of it. But taken in the right dosage, in this time they broke down the exact dosages and what they used back then. So that's kind of what I'm basing my a lot of my coursework off of is that older information with the newer science, because the newer science is more relevant too. And there was a lot of the herbs that are here native in the United States that they were unable to do thorough testing on back then. So there's, as we're going through this course, some of the glucosides that were mentioned, we're going in this next section. We didn't know about them. They didn't know about them in 1899, but we are more aware of how they work today. So the the herbalists of today don't necessarily take the approach of this. They don't look at this as part. They don't think, oh, well, that was 125 years ago. That can't be relevant today. But if you look through the book and you read it, you're, oh crap. A lot of this stuff is not only still used today. It's still pretty popular. Um, I didn't. All my information's on my laptop. So if I try to get to my laptop to give you some examples, I'll lose the live stream. So that's going to be counterintuitive to what we're trying to do. So what can we do about that? The problem with it is, we don't really want to chase the symptoms. We don't want to just keep throwing herbs at things. When I watch other TikTok videos and I see these herbalists that I'll see somebody, they'll have their little comment up here in the corner. How do I use this particular herb? And I'll hear that the herbalist, some of the herbs that I've heard them say that about are like, oh man, don't tell people necessarily how to use that herb unless they understand why they need the herb. And if I list an herb of the day and I have 15 different conditions that it helps with, and somebody goes, well, how do I use it? And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't know how you use it because I don't know. I don't know you. Okay, so I don't want to just it's like a contractor. If I'm a contractor and you say, hey, how much you can charge me to remodel my bathroom and give me a number without looking at it, you're not going to do that. Well, it's the same with your body, and you as a consumer, as somebody who watches YouTube videos and who listens to people online, you shouldn't just take all of their information at face value either, right? You need to do your own research. That's why you're literally on the internet anyway, right? You got your phone in your hand. The internet is just a click away. You can do your own research about this stuff um, without having to continually rely on somebody else. And not only that, it's kind of oftentimes a lot of these things that people talk about can be fixed by simply changing some lifestyle. Oh, sorry, I was reading the comments. I didn't mean to interrupt. So when you approach this, or when more modern herbalists approach this, it'd be really nice to see them be willing to take a look at the actual science of it. Some of these, I'll give you an example. I do have some herb books. We have a ton of herb books here, and some of these are so out of date. We've gone through and read them. There's some of them that they're kind of like a running joke here and here because some of the information is so erroneous and bad that oof. One of the guys ended up getting sued for fraud back in the 50s. So this one here, it's backwards, of course, but this one's called Breverton's Complete Herbal. What somebody did not too long ago was she took Nicholas Culpeper. If you've never heard of Nicholas Culpeper, he's one of the more if you're an herbalist, you've heard of him. He was one of the more popular herbalists from like the 1600s, 1653, I think. So he went around his part of the world and he got as many plants as he could, and he made like essentially an herb compendium that was called The English Physician and Complete Herbal of 1653. You can actually get that particular book from Nicholas Culpeper. You can get that on Amazon, I think, for free, and you can download it and have it on your. It's kind of photocopied, but you can have Nicholas Culpeper's book for free on your phone, and you can read through it. It's not digitized, right? It's just pictures, and it's really hard to read from 1653. But he was like the frontier, the pioneer. He came after all the Greeks. Socrates and all of them came with their herbal remedies. Um, and Terry Breverton went, and she made a more modern translation of Nicholas Culpeper's Complete Herbal. And this book is pretty amazing. Now, they had science from the 1600s. So their science was just as valid from 1600s in that day and age. So this information is still pretty close. If you go through and you read this book and they talk about the different types of plants, adder's tongue, asparagus, iris, hawthorn, foxglove, hellebore. Now foxglove is very toxic, right? You go out and you make a tea out of foxglove and just start randomly drinking it. That's a good way to not be very healthy. Um, but they actually get digitalis out of it. Digitalis is a heart medication, and if used properly, it's used for heart failure and other heart conditions to keep your heart going. So, I mean, yes, the plant is toxic. Sure, if you go start just randomly taking things, of course it's toxic. So is your medicine cabinet. You're not going to get into your medicine cabinet and just start randomly taking things. So that's an issue, that they don't necessarily use. Now this stuff is still relevant today, right? But some of the stuff that they talked about from this aren't necessarily as accurate today. Some of the sciences has proven that it's a bit different than what it was. So some of the more modern science has proven different uses or different counterindications of the plant. But for the most part, Nicholas Culpeper's book is fairly accurate. So if you're looking for a decent book, Breverton's Complete Herbal is I know it's reversed, but Breverton's Complete Herbal. Somebody wants to type it in. It's a pretty good book to start with, to have on hand, and it lists quite a few herbs that you wouldn't typically find. A lot of them are from Europe. You won't necessarily find here, but there's a lot of them that are here too that you can have, you can grow, you can bring here, and it's a really, really good book to have. Some of the other ones, though, let's take the Herbalist. This one is another one of ours that we happen to find. I know it's backwards. This was written in The original was written in 1918, and it went through. It goes through and it talks about a lot of the same things that you would see in the Pharmacopoeia or the Materia Medica, but it talked about how each of the herbs, and gives a little basic drawing and what each herb is good for, a little bit of how to prepare it. Dose 1 teaspoon of bark or leaves to a cup of boiling water. Drink 1 or 2 cups a day. Tincture 1/4 to 1/2 fluid drams. At that point, you'd have to go get your brass scales or find a digital scale that would measure in those types of measurements, because these were fairly accurate. Believe it or not, they got down to smaller doses in order to be you had to in order to be able to accurate anyway, in order to be able to be accurate anyway. So this one isn't a bad book, but again, some of the science has shown later that it's not necessarily as relevant as that. So what I'd like to see, and you get some of this with some of the naturopathic doctors that we have today, is they're more apt to want to use some of the science that they're finding with the herbs and incorporate them into their practice versus, A, you have the ones that just don't listen to herbs at all, and then B, you have the ones that don't listen to the science behind the herbs. They just use them blindly. Um, it's very frustrating from an herbalist perspective. I'll give you some examples, or just at least one example that stands out to me. About 10 years ago or so, I heard a story, and it's like, the first time I heard it, it was like, man, it was a terrible tragedy. It's like, I just hate it when people do that. So there was a gentleman down in Florida who was an herbalist, and he touted herbal remedies left and right, and he was not very good. He went and convinced somebody, a young man, to stop taking his diabetic medication, and that poor guy died. Right, the young man died, and the way he did it was such a way. It was like he was almost trying to deliberately sabotage. He's the kind of person that makes all natural healers look terrible. He told the guy, "Oh yeah, man, just stop taking all your medication and just start using lavender essential oil." And while lavender essential oil can kind of help with that a little bit, aromatherapy wise, there's other things you would have to do, and then there's more to it than just if he's diabetic. Why is he diabetic? Does his pancreas work at all? Does he produce any type of insulin? Is his body just highly insulin resistant? What's the issue and why? But to just tell him to stop taking your medicine and try this, here, you'll be just fine, man. That's awful. That's it's almost it's certainly incompetent, right? There's a lot of herbalists that are like that. There's the ones that'll just do the bare basics of research, and anytime somebody just mentions a symptom, I used to do that a lot too. I don't do it anymore. Don't get me wrong. I still think of right. I'll think of those herbs in my head, but I I've learned to keep my mouth shut and I listen to what they're saying, and then I'll ask questions or something. If it's especially if it's a consultation, then I ask questions. But if it's just like a random friend or something, I just let them vent and I don't really say much of anything. If it's something simple like I have a headache, I'll usually ask what kind of headache you have. And they always look at me like I'm dumb. I'm like, well, if it's up front, it's probably a sinus headache. If it's on the side, it's probably stress. If it's in the back over here or on top, it could be posture. So what kind of headache do you have? And I can help you with a solution. Um, but there's other condition. My stomach hurts. Okay, where's it hurt? Why does it hurt? What have you eaten? What have you not eaten? And then you go down the list of litany of things. I wonder how the only herbalists tested what they grew and foraged to use medicine. Well, they didn't. I mean, well, okay, so don't get me wrong. They knew. Okay, I'll give you some examples real quick. They already knew the chemical compounds that were present. If you're talking before the early herbalists. Well, they had to trial by error. And oftentimes back in the day, okay, so here's the question. Cindy says, I wonder how the early herbalists tested what they grew and foraged to use as medicine. Now, this is probably way before doctors, official doctors, where you have your shamans, your witch doctors, your medicine people, your whatever, okay, depending on how the tribes work. They would watch what the animals ate, right? Because at that point, now we can't eat everything that the animals can eat, right? Because we don't eat poison ivy, but goats love it. But for the most part, we would eat what animals would eat, and of course, we had to do a lot of testing. Back in the day, the Greeks did a lot of that. My husband has Addison's disease, and I would never tell him about his medicine, but it's still research. Right? They didn't have to worry, right? They didn't have to worry about pesticides, but they did have to do trial and error. Back in that day, they didn't really have a choice. But if you look at it from a logical viewpoint, that was their science of the day. It was still scientific, right? If you give it to three people and two of them die, you probably shouldn't take too much of that. But I mean, a lot of it was probably just trial and error, and you had to go from there. But from what I understand, a lot of them would watch animals, and of course, herbal medicine goes back thousands of years. It's been in the it's in the Sumerian texts, it's in the Bible, it's in all the old holy texts and all. Even the Egyptians and everything. And they had some quite advanced science, quite advanced medical techniques. They were drilling into people's heads and stuff back in Egypt. So, I mean, they kind of knew things. But today, we've as herbalists, we seem to have forgotten all that. We've forgotten that there is actual science behind our herbs, right? There's real science, and that would help people that are trying to be better, to people that are trying to learn. From my perspective, it helps people become more accepting for herbal medicine. Because here's the thing: if I try to tell you that herbs can do this, and this, but I don't provide you any proof, I would have to be very convincing, right? And then people could blindly. But if I don't have any proof, and I feel like I'm doing the people that I'm trying to help a disservice. So it's taken me a long time to learn patience enough to keep my mouth shut enough to do my research first before I just start throwing things out there. It does take a lot of effort on my part to do that. Let's see, true sir, but who found belladonna first? Well, that's a good question. Because there's blueberries and there's other berries that are almost black that are that are you can eat. Look at blackberries. Elderberries are black. But if you actually look at a belladonna, you can look them up. If you look at a belladonna fruit, it looks almost like a little tiny black tomato. It looks exactly like a tiny black tomato. They're part of the same family. Potatoes, tomatoes, they're eggplant. They're all part of the same nightshade family. And the fruits, if you look at them, if you really look close at the fruits, they're almost identical. They're just different size. So I have to get back on topic. So yeah, I mean, those would have had to have been done with trial and error. Now, imagine having to be the one to do the trial and error with some of those plants. Watching animals must have felt. And well, I mean, that they didn't really have much of a choice, not really, and other than just taking it themselves. So if you see an animal take something, and then of course, over time they would figure out. I guess there's records that go back 40,000 years, and you can look it up. There's records that go back 40,000 years to where they were using emu oil or emu as medicine. Because they knew that the fat from the emu could help heal wounds. Well, 40,000 years. That was when we were, in theory, that was back when we were hunter gatherers, but yeah, we still knew that we could get fat from a bird and it would help heal wounds. That's pretty impressive. Now today, and I have a hard time. In some cases, I talk to a few herbalists, but I get frustrated with some of them, um, that don't necessarily look at the whole thing. I watched my dog eat stinging nettle, looked it up, and found that I could eat, so I have. Stinging nettle is actually one of the most nutritious plants you have in your yard, to be fair. My first time attending. Oh, hey, Angie, I'm glad you're here. Oh, yeah, your show's on. Enjoy your show. I will see you next week. Yeah, if you watch, I mean, my dog Morpheus, he's kind of silly. He'll go and when we had a slippery elm that went mast, it had lost a bunch of seeds, and slippery elm saplings everywhere. He would go through and specifically, we had hundreds of slippery elm saplings. He would go through and eat specifically, just go through and eat just the slippery elm saplings, and we didn't have any left over. He got them all, but he would do it for his digestion, and obviously that. I knew that it worked for that, so it was kind of interesting that they did too. I've always kind of said that for the most part, your animal is going to be one of your best herbalists. They typically have a really good sense of what they should and shouldn't eat. There are some people that say, well, they'll eat aloe, and aloe is poisonous. Well, aloe is not poisonous to an animal. Aloe is actually quite good for animals, but you got to use it in moderation. Some cats will just tend to overeat it, right? And then they get the runs, and they'll feel like they're going to die, but it's a beneficial plant. Pretty healthy for the most part. So how can we approach it a little bit? There's an aloe there right there, by the way. How can we approach it a bit differently though to make people understand that herbal medicine is really the way it was supposed to be in the beginning, way before they had all of the side effects, way before they I mean they still had side effects, don't get me wrong, but they used them properly. They knew how to use them. They knew what they were doing. Their science was just as advanced. They had to try them, right? Well, they just, here, try this, buddy. Has IBS. I give him. Sure. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. See, Angie says that her dog has IBS and she gives it slippery elm and it works for the dog. It also works for people for that reason too. Um, but I think that if we were able to find, because what's going to happen here pretty soon is real quick before they're going to try to find a way to regulate the supplements that we have or the herbs that we have or the ability for us to be able to buy or use them in a meaningful way. So we need to learn, which is why I'm trying to teach people as much as possible. We need to learn the ones that we have available, so we can make it more self-sustaining and usable. I think herbalists should probably take more of an approach of figuring out what the root cause of the problem is and making the body do what the body does naturally. Our bodies are really great machines if you think about it. Our liver is regenerating, it regrows. Our body, you essentially get a new body every 7 years as it, sheds the shells, the cells over time. Which is sometimes why you develop allergies at a later time. There are some doctors that disagree with that. There's other doctors that say, yeah, that's really how that works. So I guess it depends on which side of the fence you are on that. But so our bodies are really these incredible machines, and there really isn't anything we shouldn't be able to recover from if we approach it in a proper way. I did a video not too long ago. You can go down my timeline. The 3Ds of health, and how I talked with a couple of doctors about this, and they said, yeah, that's actually a pretty good approach. It's a good start. My 3Ds of health go with three things. You start with detox, and then you go to digestion, and then you go to diet. Um, I prefer that order, but you do it any order you want. But obviously, for myself, I'd want to start with a detox my body first, and do it properly. So you would, there's various methods you could do. You could do black walnut hulls. You could do activated charcoal, bentonite clay, diatomaceous earth. There's tons of herbs that you can use to do that. Um, that work really well for that too. So I just found out today that mustard is really good for. I mean, I knew mustard had some really good medicinal properties, but I actually started reading some science, and mustard is in mustard leaf, um, as a tea, is really good for pulling heavy metals out of the body, like really good at it. And so I figured using that in conjunction with like chaparral and maybe dandelion and chicory would be a really good detox to pull some of the heavy metals and toxins out of the body. Then you have your parasites, right? So that'd be something else you need to detox from. 80% of the population of the world, it's estimated 80% of the population has some sort of parasite. So that means you too. Four out of five people you talk to potentially have some sort of parasite. So, and that comes from our food. You should do. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna ruin you guys. There's only 12 of you, so I'm only gonna ruin 12 of you. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go to TikTok and look up a hot dog under a microscope, and then I probably guarantee you'll never eat a hot dog again. Mustard, yes, mustard the veggie, much mustard the seed is extremely medicinal. I'm actually getting ready to do a video about that. I have some sponsors that are going to be sending some stuff. One guy, his name is Woody Wood Grinder, and he's sending me one of his grinders. Now, some people use it for cannabis to grind their cannabis, but it's considered an herb grinder. So when it comes in, I'm going to show everybody that you can use the grinder like that to do your teas. Go outside, we'll dry some leaves, we'll grind them up in the grinder, and I'll show you how to make a tea with a grinder. I probably won't be able to do it on TikTok because TikTok right now kind of has me, with last week's live and the way that debacle went. I'm kind of messed up right now with TikTok, but I will be able to do the wood grinder and show everybody how to make a very easy and quick tea. Coffee grinder works. Um, you can't get stinging nettles to grow. Well, you could try to get some comfrey. If you get some comfrey to grow, and then you take some of the comfrey leaf and add it to the ground, your stinging nettles should grow. But you got to keep it kind of moist. The ground has to be fairly damp, and don't let it get too dry. If it gets too dry, the stinging nettles don't like that. So if you got comfrey, yeah, take the comfrey leaf, cut it up, dice it up, put it in the ground, or take some of it, put it in a bucket of water, and you fill the water about a quarter, you fill the bucket about a quarter of the way, and then you fill the rest with water, and just let it sit. It's gonna smell like death. Comfrey, when comfrey decomposes, it smells awful. But once it's done decomposing, you can take that and use it as a fertilizer for your soil. So that'll help too. Um, back to on topic. So I think that oftentimes people will recommend the wrong thing, and it's frustrating. I also think that the herbal teas can do people a disservice too. I meant to talk about this earlier. I got sidetracked. The problem with herbal teas is the herbs, the herbs that are in them. Now, there are some herbs that you can take daily. These are what I call tonic herbs. Tonic herbs are herbs that you have like your chamomile, cinnamon, um, boy, your mints, any of your mints you can take. All of these herbs that are up here, I wouldn't take them any day. Lemongrass is a good daily herb. Um, but other than that, if you're taking herbs, or you're drinking teas, and it has like, 6 or 7 different herbs in it, and you're drinking 2 or 3 cups a day, think about it. Each one of those herbs has medicinal properties. Each one of those herbs have compounds in it that are chemical compounds that will react to your body in different ways. So if you start randomly, oh, that looks tasty. Turmeric is also one you can take daily, by the way. I had to remember. Um, that looks tasty. But let's say that happens to have St. John's wort in it by chance, right? It's one of the smaller ingredients, but it's further down, and it wasn't on the box, and you didn't really think about it. You started taking it, but you're on psych meds. That could be bad, right? Because now you have St. John's wort, which is known to help your body work better. It helps things like it helps your brain produce better norepinephrine, and all the feel good chemicals that the brain will typically produce. Well, your psych drugs are supposed to do the same thing, but when they interact with each other, it sends it off the charts, and then people tend to have breakdowns and issues. So you read your labels really carefully, and you look at some of the herbs that are in these herb blend mixes, and they can be doing your body a disservice. You may not need those particular compounds in your body, but you're taking but the tea tastes good, or the tea looks good, and oh look, Tazo said that it's specifically crafted for blah, 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 but you don't know that you need that. So why would you take it, right? You know, stick with your herbs that are okay for daily use. So you're going to stick with your mints, you're going to stick with your chamomiles, but try to stay away from the more exotic herbs. Passion flower is also another herb. It's very powerful. Passion flower is a great herb if you are looking for energy, but it also has psychoactive properties too. So and there's been some cases where people that have taken passion flower along with psych meds have also had similar responses to what you would have with St. John's wort. So just found out how to comment on here. Oh, hi Ben. I found bone's amazing. Okay, so you're going to use bone set very similarly to the way you would use comfrey, right? And I've done videos on comfrey too. They are almost identical in all their composition, right? Not the same chemical composition, but in everything that they do. And if you looked up acetaminophen, I happen to think that acetaminophen, the main root of that particular chemical, came from either, because it's been around for over 100 years too. It either came from bone set or comfrey, because they have the exact same um, properties they as acetaminophen does. So I have, but I haven't been able to prove it. I haven't been able to see and figure out exactly where acetaminophen came from. Though I tried really hard. I did a lot of digging and searching. Couldn't find it. I really tried. So we have to be careful, and the same goes with our herbal capsules. If you're just going to Walmart, you're buying capsules because it looks good to take it. Oh, this will help my mood. Well, it might, but what other medicines are you taking? And you need to make sure that if you're going to start grabbing herbal supplements, you need to make sure that they're not going to counteraindicate against any of your medicines, because that's the other thing about this. More than half the U.S. population has some sort of prescription drug. So, I mean, that means that 1 out of 2 people that you talk to is on some sort of prescription, and just start randomly recommending herbs to people like that, it is doing them a disservice too, because it could be bad for their medicine, or it could be bad for their body because of the medicine that they're taking. No, who said that? I didn't say anything about comfrey, but no. Do your research on comfrey. I should probably do a series of videos on comfrey. Comfrey's, I'm not telling you to take it, but I want you to do some research on comfrey. Yes, it's highly alkalized, right? So if you use it improperly, just like acetaminophen, you'll have the same. It'll do the same thing to you that acetaminophen will. So you have to use everything. I'm not telling you to use it, but everything has to be used in moderation. Um, Everything has to be used in moderation. Comfrey is one of the most anti-inflammatory herbs on the planet. It is amazing. It is, and if you actually trim your comfrey, you keep trimming it down, you could get up to 36 pounds a year off one plant. So, it's really good renewable too. Now, I want you to do some research on it, but I know of people that eat the young greens, and they're super nutritious, super nutritious. It's actually a very, the roots have more alkaloids in them, but they're also really good for healing too. I am running down to my 1 hour time limit, though. We have about 2.5 minutes. So I still want to try to stick to that 1 hour. Next week, I want some people may leave comments on the video. Leave some suggestions for what you'd like to see next week, and see if I can get it put together. I got a lot of things going this week. Don't forget, we have the Make Your Own Salve class. It's coming up. These are available. You should make your own salve kit. Class will be next Saturday at 2:30. It'll be live here on YouTube, but it'll also be at the Bare Soul Studio and Rock Shop. But we'll be at their studio. We're not going to actually be live at the Rock Shop itself. They have a studio where they do things like that. If you want to join in, feel free to call them. You can mix comfrey with bone set, but why? They do the same thing. Both of them will heal wounds, will heal tissue up to 30% faster. This has all been proven with science. They'll heal tissue up to 30% faster. They can they're antiseptic, so they kill bacteria and fungus. I can, but not tonight, because I am down to our time limit. We are down to like 1 minute, but I could do comfrey and plantain next week. Maybe talk about how about some first aid plants from the yard. How does that sound? How about we do some first aid? Because comfrey, plantain, there's a ton of first aid plants from the yard. How about we do that? We'll do that for next week. Hey Mitchell, good to see you. I didn't know you were here. We are down to like 45 seconds. So yeah, feel free to join us down there, and we'll be live, and you guys can leave comments. Hopefully there'll be somebody there that can read the comments while I'm doing the live, because we're going to try to keep it. I'm going to try to show you the whole process from start to finish. And if I have time and if I have the resources, I will see about making one that does not have any beeswax in it. We'll see. But awesome. Bring as many friends as you can. Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's fill this place up. See if we can have more than 13. But you guys have a great night. Thanks for joining.